Ahead of the changes to the coronavirus job retention scheme tomorrow, we've been asking for your questions this morning on the latest of our Ask GMS series. This morning we're focusing on jobs, redundancy and all things employment related as the pandemic continues to affect the nation's workforce. Here to answer your questions this morning are David Martin, an employment lawyer and partner at Thompson Solicitors.
Good morning.
And let me just remind people they can text us on 80295, email goodmorningscotland@bbc.co.uk or use the hashtag BBCGMS on social media. David, can I start with you and just maybe ask you to set out some of the problems, some of the issues around furloughing, and particularly people are asking, if they've been furloughed, sometimes they're asked to come into work. Is that legal? Can people be asked to do that?
I mean, that's been one of the features of the scheme from the very start, which it was very clear originally, which is you absolutely cannot, if you are furloughed for a particular period, you cannot do any work. That changed recently. I think that was welcomed by a number of employers, and you can come in and do some sort of work part-time. Now, you will be paid by your employer for the work that you do part-time, but there'll be a period if you remain partially furloughed where the government will pick up the wages for that period. So that changed last month, and a lot of employers we have seen, they've started reintegrating workers into the workplace using that provision.
David, we were talking earlier about reading out some messages from teachers who were uncomfortable about going back into work in August when the schools reopen. But what can people in general do if they go back to work and do feel uncomfortable with safety measures as a result of COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important features of the return to work is going to be around risk assessments. Most employers who are planning to bring employees back will already have started thinking about risk assessments. I think the interesting thing about risk assessments from a COVID point of view is that there's probably going to have to be multiple risk assessments for different people. And I think I know you spoke to somebody earlier who had concerns about returning to work because of particular medical conditions. Now, I think what we're really going to have to see is a general risk assessment for most workplaces, which sets out the COVID risk for everybody and makes recommendations around, hand washing, social distancing, all that sort of thing. But then very specific risk assessments around people's individual medical conditions. I think it's probably not just their medical conditions, it's medical conditions that those who they're living with or caring for might have. And I think it's really up to the employers to start speaking to their staff and employee representatives to start discussing how the workplace is going to look when they return. And that is a legal obligation that all employers have, and that's really what I would encourage employers and employees to start doing, is discussing those concerns and right down to an individual basis.
And David, if you want to take this one, what's the law say about my holidays that I had arranged with my employer before the furlough scheme started, and am I still entitled to my full holiday entitlement?
Yes, you are still entitled to that full holiday entitlement. There is a question as to when you can take holidays and whether your employer can force you to take holidays when you're on furlough. And I think the guidance has really moved now to be clear that if your employer says we want you to take holidays when you're on furlough, then they can oblige you to do that. But similarly, I think if you've got holidays booked, then you should be allowed to take those. One of the most important things, obviously I heard you talking earlier about the changes to the scheme recently, and that involves how we calculate things like redundancy pay if it becomes necessary, and we hope not, but also things like notice pay, and we understand holiday pay as well. And what that's going to do is make it clear that if you do take a period of holiday, then you should be paid your full holiday pay or your full normal pay for that period of holiday. So for those people who are on 80% of pay at the moment, it might actually be quite useful to take some holiday pay because it will bump up their salary to the 100%.